On August 1st, 30 BC, Mark Antony, the Roman general, committed suicide by stabbing himself in Alexandria, having lost the Battle of Actium against Octavian. He thought his third wife Cleopatra had already died, but legend has it that he was brought to her and died in her arms. Cleopatra also killed herself using poison from a snake. His death freed up Octavian, his great political rival, to take the name Augustus. On August 1st, 1798, as part of the Egyptian and Mediterranean campaigns of the War of the Second Coalition, the Battle of the Nile was fought between the Royal Navy and the French Navy at Abu Qir Bay in Egypt. This battle marked the decisive climax of the Mediterranean campaign of 1798. The campaign had begun 3 months earlier when a large French fleet sailed from Toulon to Alexandria, transporting Napoleon Bonaparte and his expeditionary force to Egypt. A British fleet commanded by Rear Admiral Sir Horatio Nelson intercepted and decisively defeated the French fleet under Vice Admiral François-Paul Bruet de Gallier, which had escorted Napoleon's army. Napoleon's objective was to conquer Egypt as the first stage of a larger campaign aimed at threatening British India and weakening Britain's role in the French Revolutionary Wars. Throughout the voyage, Nelson relentlessly pursued the French fleet across the Mediterranean for more than 2 months, narrowly missing it on several occasions. Napoleon maintained strict secrecy about his destination, enabling him to capture Malta and land his forces in Egypt before the British could intercept him. After Napoleon's troops had disembarked, Bruet anchored the French fleet in Abu Qir Bay, about 20 miles northeast of Alexandria, believing the position offered strong defensive advantages. However, when Nelson arrived on August 1st, he immediately ordered an attack. The French were caught off guard because Bruet had not maintained effective reconnaissance, and many of his scouting crews were ashore gathering supplies. Nelson divided his fleet into 2 groups, with one attacking between the French ships and the shoreline while the other engaged from the seaward side. The French fleet became trapped in a devastating crossfire. After hours of intense fighting, the French flagship Orient exploded at approximately 10 p.m., throwing the battle into chaos. With Bruet killed and most of the fleet destroyed or captured, only 2 ships of the line and 2 frigates escaped from the 17 French warships that took part in the battle. The British victory dramatically shifted the balance of power in the Mediterranean, establishing the Royal Navy's dominance for the remainder of the Napoleonic Wars. It also encouraged other European nations to renew their opposition to France, contributing to the formation of the War of the Second Coalition. Napoleon's army was left isolated in Egypt, and British naval control later played a key role in the French defeat during the Siege of Acre in 1799, which ultimately forced Napoleon to abandon his Egyptian campaign and return to Europe. Although Nelson was wounded during the battle, he was celebrated throughout Europe as a national hero and was later elevated to the peerage as Baron Nelson. His captains also earned widespread recognition and became known as the famous Band of Brothers. The battle has remained one of history's most celebrated naval victories and has been immortalized in literature, most notably in Felicia Hemans' 1826 poem, Casabianca. On August 1st, 1927, the Nanchang Uprising took place, in which conflict between the Chinese Communist Party and the Nationalist Party of China became an outright rebellion. It marked the beginning of the Chinese Civil War. It was launched by the Chinese Communist Party in response to the massacre of its members by the Kuomintang during the Shanghai Massacre 4 months earlier. In preparation for the revolt, the left wing of the Kuomintang established a revolutionary committee in Nanchang with the goal of sparking a larger peasant uprising across China. Among its political leaders were Deng Yanda, Song Qingling, and Zhang Fakui, although Zhang later turned against the movement and helped suppress the rebellion. The military uprising was led by communist commanders including Ho Long and Zhou Enlai, who attempted to seize control of Nanchang following the collapse of the first alliance between the Kuomintang and the Communists. Other prominent leaders involved in the operation included Zhou De, Yi Ting, and Liu Bochang. Communist forces successfully captured Nanchang, but were forced to withdraw after facing strong counterattacks from Kuomintang troops. By August 5th, they had broken out of the city and retreated to the Jigang Mountains in western Jiangxi. The uprising later gained lasting historical significance as August 1st, 1927 is officially recognized as the founding anniversary of the People's Liberation Army and commemorates its first military action against the Kuomintang and the National Revolutionary Army. 90 years ago, on August 1st, 1936, the 1936 Summer Olympics opened in Berlin, Nazi Germany. Berlin was awarded the right to host the 1936 Summer Olympics after defeating Barcelona during the 29th IOC session in 1931. The selection process was notable because it was only the second and ultimately the last time that the International Olympic Committee chose an Olympic host city through a ballot in which the bidding cities themselves were allowed to vote. Following the 1936 selection, the IOC changed its rules to prevent cities hosting the voting session from being eligible to host the Games. The Games were opened by Nazi Führer Adolf Hitler, and the Olympic cauldron was lit by Fritz Schilgen. The 1936 Summer Olympics had originally been awarded to Germany during the era of the Weimar Republic. By the time the Games were held, however, the country was under Nazi rule and Adolf Hitler's government used the Olympics as a major propaganda opportunity. To present Germany as a peaceful and welcoming nation, officials temporarily removed anti-Semitic signs and reduced the most visible forms of persecution during the event. Despite these efforts, nearly all Jewish and Romani athletes were excluded from the German Olympic team. The only exception was fencer Helene Meyer, who had one Jewish parent and competed for Germany. Several countries, including Czechoslovakia, France, the Netherlands, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and the United States considered boycotting or relocating the Games, but those efforts were unsuccessful. In total, 49 nations participated, making it the largest Olympic Games held up to that time. The Berlin Olympics introduced several historic innovations. They were the first Olympic Games to be televised and the first to feature a torch relay carrying the Olympic flame from Olympia, Greece, to the host city. Created specifically for the 1936 Games, the torch relay became a permanent Olympic tradition. Filmmaker Leni Riefenstahl also documented the event in her two-part film Olympia, which introduced groundbreaking sports cinematography techniques and influenced future filmmaking. American athlete Jesse Owens became the standout performer of the Games by winning 4 gold medals in the sprinting and long jump events. Germany finished at the top of the medal table with 101 medals, including 38 gold, while the United States placed second with 57 medals. The Olympics were the last to be held under IOC President Henri de Balliet-Latour. Because of the outbreak and global impact of the Second World War, no Olympic Games were held for the next 12 years. The Olympics finally resumed in 1948 with the Winter Games in St. Moritz, Switzerland, followed by the Summer Games in London, England. On August 1st, 1944, during World War II, the Warsaw Uprising was launched by the Polish underground resistance to liberate Warsaw from Nazi German occupation. The uprising was launched to coincide with the German withdrawal from Poland as Soviet forces advanced toward the capital. However, after reaching the eastern outskirts of Warsaw, the Red Army halted its offensive, allowing German forces time to regroup, crush the Polish resistance, and systematically destroy the city in retaliation. The fighting lasted for 63 days and received very little outside assistance. making it the largest single military operation carried out by a European resistance movement during World War II. The defeat of the uprising and the destruction of the Home Army allowed the Soviet-backed Polish administration to establish control over Poland after the war, replacing the Polish government in exile based in London. Poland subsequently became part of the Soviet-aligned Eastern Bloc until 1989. The uprising formed part of Operation Tempest, a nationwide campaign launched alongside the Soviet Lublin-Brest offensive. The Polish Home Army sought to liberate Warsaw from German occupation while supporting the Allied war effort against Nazi Germany. Politically, the underground government hoped to re-establish Polish sovereignty before the Soviet Union and the Soviet-backed Polish Committee of National Liberation could assume authority over the country. Additional factors contributing to the uprising included German plans for mass deportations of able-bodied Polish civilians, broadcasts from Radio Moscow encouraging resistance, and a widespread desire among the Polish people for justice after 5 years of brutal occupation. Although the Home Army achieved early successes, German forces launched a powerful counteroffensive, and on August 25th, heavy fighting and reprisals resulted in the deaths of as many as 40,000 civilians. The conflict soon became a prolonged siege that favored the better-equipped German military. After exhausting their supplies and ammunition, the Polish resistance surrendered on October 2nd. Following the surrender, German authorities deported the surviving civilian population and deliberately destroyed much of Warsaw. German losses during the uprising totaled approximately 16,000 soldiers, but the human cost for Poland was far greater. Historians estimate that around 16,000 Home Army fighters were killed and another 6,000 were seriously wounded. Civilian casualties were especially devastating, with between 150,000 and 200,000 Polish civilians losing their lives, many through mass executions carried out by German forces. Jews who had been hidden by Polish families were also discovered during house-to-house searches and large-scale evacuations of entire neighborhoods. The legacy of the Warsaw Uprising remains the subject of historical debate. Many regard it as an extraordinary act of courage and national resistance, while others view it as a tragic sacrifice that resulted in enormous losses. Polish and Western historians generally agree that Joseph Stalin deliberately halted the Soviet advance outside Warsaw, allowing the Germans to weaken and destroy the Polish Home Army while advancing Soviet political objectives in post-war Poland. Some historians also argue that the uprising marked an early turning point that foreshadowed the emerging tensions of the Cold War. And 60 years ago, on August 1st, 1966, the University of Texas Tower shooting occurred when 25-year-old Marine veteran Charles Whitman indiscriminately fired at members of the public, both within the main building tower and from the tower's observation deck. Whitman murdered 15 people, including an unborn child, and wounded 31 others during the University of Texas Tower shooting before he was shot and killed by 2 officers of the Austin Police Department. The attack lasted approximately 96 minutes from the time Whitman first opened fire from the university's observation deck. Earlier that day, Whitman had murdered both his wife and his mother by stabbing them to death. In notes he left behind, he claimed he wanted to spare them what he believed would be the shame and suffering caused by his planned actions. An autopsy later revealed that Whitman had a pecan-sized tumor located in the white matter above his amygdala. Although investigators found no direct connection between the tumor and his behavior, some medical experts have suggested it may have contributed to the violent impulses he had reportedly experienced for several years before the attack. At the time of the shooting, it was the deadliest mass shooting committed by a lone gunman in United States history. That record stood until 1984, when it was surpassed by the San Ysidro McDonald's massacre. To those who are from Texas, never forget Austin, 1966. Well, that's all I have for my historical milestones for the first day of August. If you like what you hear, don't forget to leave a comment down below and subscribe. This is Stephen Luke, and I'll see you on the next historical milestone video.